Super. Good morning to everybody on behalf of the European Transport Safety Council, and welcome to this PIN webinar on the role of speed in the safe system. On behalf of ETSC, I want to welcome all the participants, the audience, the speakers. So this is a webinar taking place in the framework of our Road Safety Performance Index, our PIN program, which has been going since 2006. The PIN program aims to identify and promote best practice and galvanize political leadership. We're hoping for that from the Swedish EU presidency, which is going on until the end of June. It's a very important Transport Council happening on the 1st of June. So today's focus will be looking at speed, the number one pillar in road safety. From the side of the Road Safety Performance Index, the PIN, ETSC published a PIN report specifically looking at speeding in 2019. But since then, a number of the PIN reports have also been looking at reducing speed, the importance of speed. So our PIN flash on pedestrians and cyclists in urban areas, and then more recently, a report looking at truck and van safety. Before I pass the word to our chair, Lars Ekman from the Swedish Transport Administration, just want to wish all of you a great webinar, good discussions, some good inspiration also for reducing road deaths and serious injuries on our roads. Over to you, Lars. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Ellen. It's a pleasure to be here and to be trying to moderate this. It's my hard task to keep us within the time frame here. I have to say some practical parts. You have to be aware that this event is recorded to be able to watch afterwards. And regarding questions, the idea is that we collect all the questions in the end, so we could have a good discussion on speed and so on. There is one exception. Maria have to leave earlier, so direct questions to Maria, we have to take there in that connection. But we go on with some words from Toyota Motors Europe, who are our partners in the PIN program, and we are grateful for their support. So I give the floor to Bengt Dahlström from Toyota Motor. And as far as I understand, you are responsible for the external affairs. Welcome.
Part of that, yeah, thank you, Lars, and thank you for this opportunity. Toyota Motor Europe, I'm coming from Toyota Sweden. Toyota Motor Europe started to support ETSC already in 2006. And during the years, a lot of things has happened, of course, with the cars, smart driver support system, but also with the road infrastructure. But allow me to start with an example from my experience from my own life. When I was 18, just 1 week after I received my driving license, I bought my first car. It was a sports car. It has 87 horsepower, and it made me king of the road. And as I saw myself as a very experienced driver already the first week, even if I was the only one, it was a challenge for the people around me in the traffic, I can promise you. But already just a few years later, the first GTI car, a small passenger car, was launched with 100 horsepower. It was stunning at that time. And voices was raised already then about and concerned about what happened with those cars when young drivers with less experience will be behind the steering wheel. And to meet the environmental challenges we're facing now, we can see a huge wave of electrification in different layers. It's about electric hybrids, plug-in hybrids, fuel cells, and of course, battery electrical vehicles. With this type of technology, with electrical motors, we suddenly facing cars, family cars, with a huge number of horsepower. We're talking about, if we're looking at the best-selling cars in models in Sweden, it's about 200, between 200 and about 500 horsepower. And they can reach maximum allowed speed in a country road in Sweden in about 3 to 7 seconds. Add to that we, from the car industry at least, in advertisement and also in movies and car magazine, has seen a glorification of speed and fast driving. And so what we're facing now, it's hard when you buy these electric vehicles models. Suddenly you have a car which is having maybe twice or 3 times so high horsepower, number of horsepower that you are used to have. So of course it's a challenge to make those drivers not using or try to use this really high-powered cars. Today's family cars has horsepower, number of horsepower, which is in the same level that yesterday's super sports car. But to overcome this type of challenge and other challenges, we have to work together. No actor can solve the problems and challenges alone. We really need to share the same picture of the challenge that we have ahead of us. At the same time, electrification and also connected cars open up for a next step when it comes to road safety. If we can, as they already do in Japan, can make cars, vehicles to communicate with the road infrastructure, we see a huge potential when it comes to avoid accidents that is very common today. So with that potential, we can see that the coming years will be of a high interest for us as well. With these words, I would like to hand over to Lars again, that will guide us during the day. And thank you very much.
Thank you ever so much. With this very interesting confession almost about speed and the car industry part of this, I think that will be something we will discuss in the end. But since we are spot on time, I will give the floor to my close friend Maria, talking about her view on speed, the role of speed in the safe system.
Thank you, Lars. Oh, thanks a lot. And I'm happy to be invited here. I'm Director of Traffic Safety at the Swedish Transport Administration. And today we will talk about speeds, but I would like to step out a little bit and take a little bit broader picture. And I think when you're in this road safety community, it's such a new platform that we have since we're now included in the 2030 agenda. And that means new thing, that it's a signal that road safety is an important and a big health problem compared to other challenges. And it also gives us a new platform, because normally we work we are working in traffic safety community. We normally have our own arena. We're working quite isolated, I would say. But this is open up to much more working with other sustainability issues where we can gain from each other. So that's really something that we should take care of, and taking care of much more than we have done so far. So what can we do with this new platform? Road safety is very much included in other sustainability goals, but I would like to lift, for instance, the 8.6 goals that has to do with safe working conditions. That is important, that we can do much more there to combine road safety with that. It's included in the 11.2 that has to do with livability cities. And of course, safety is one of the foundation, one of the important bases to have a livable city. But it's also included in 12, I think it's 12.6 and 12.8, that has to do with both sustainability reporting, that larger companies that has at least 500 employees need to have a sustainability report. And we need better tools to integrate road safety in this sustainability report. Of course, you should report your road safety footprints in the same way as you report your climate footprint and other things that you're doing. And also, I would like to lift the procurement. That is also a tool that we need to be much better in using. And that is also something that is very central in the global goals, that we should use procurement as an important way of spreading, making it the sustainability and also road safety on a broader platform. So safe working conditions, livable cities, and that children can walk and cycle to school are all examples of where road safety is a core integrated quality in the planning stage. And that's so important that we come in earlier in the process. Normally, road safety is something that you handle afterwards when you see the consequences. But if we can be much better in being in the planning stage, we all would gain from that. So the question is, how can road safety become a significant topic for occupational health and safety, procurement, and as well as city planning? I think the agenda is one big important tool. I think that combining much more the work with the private sector, how they also are important in contributing to road safety in a much more larger scale than they're doing today. It's not enough with the authorities and the vehicle industry that taking care and are responsible for road safety. We need a much more important stakeholders and the leadership from other parts that also take more responsibility. So these tools that I mentioned, I think that could be something that we can do something more of. And by combining road safety with other sustainability goals as well, work together with other communities, that would also gain the question. So, but this will not happen by its own. We all need to see them, to focus on them, and to do some work to make it happen. But if we're then talking about speeds, I mean, speed, I would say it's one typical question that is not only about road safety, it's so much more about a sustainable, livable city. It's about possibility to walk and cycle and so many other things. And I think Paris is one example of, they're not talking about that they reduced the speed to 30 kilometers per hour that has had to do with road safety. They were much more talking about the improved air quality in the city and how they would like to have more walking and cycling and public transport in the city core. So this is a good example where we, I think we can go much further and to integrate road safety in the planning stage. Another example, we looked at all fatalities during a 3-year period, and nearly half of all road fatalities occurred in the value chain from commercial traffic. either in their own value chain or the opposite parts value chain. And if you also include third part, which then I mean cyclists and pedestrians as well, I mean, then the number will be even larger. So we need to include the private sector and also our own big organizations and how we can measure our road safety footprints. And there today are some new tools, both ISO 39001, that is an help, but also FIA index, I think many of you heard about, that how you can measure the road safety footprints and how you can tell what you will do in the future. So this is also important to include. And also when you're talking about the value chain and including road safety in the value chain for large companies especially, it's important to know that these companies very often start their journey in a low and middle income country and then end up back again in high income countries. So this kind of describing the road safety footprints and your actions for making the process safer, that would gain road safety benefits in many countries. Another example to use procurement, my own authority together with the police had a high level meeting with the biggest transport buyers in Sweden. And we were talking about the expectation of non-speeding and what is our role, what is the police role, and what do we expect from them. And these discussions ended up with common requirements for how you can formulate requirements when it comes to the procurement of transports. So we have requirements that supplier measure and report deviations in speed compliance at aggregated level. So it's not interesting to know on each individual level, it's more on the aggregated level. For instance, the last 3 months, how many % did not live up to a non-speeding transport? And there are a lot of good tools that you can work with today. There are fleet management programs that can help you. So it's not that you have to go out there and check one by one. So this is one example of how you can work together and have discussions with the private sector as well. This is another tool, geofencing, and I guess most know that these virtual boundaries, fences, that are normally used in cities when it comes to electrical scooters, where you can control the maximum speed. And in the same way, you can, of course, do that, especially with the commercial traffic, and use the procurement in saying that we will not accept speeding. And geofencing is one way that you can show that everything is okay. So it's really a unique potential to support a sustainable society, and the investment in software is already done. They exist in buses and some lorries, and the software is already in all personal vehicles as well. But I think our focus should be on commercial traffic, taxis, buses, goods deliveries as well. And you will hear more about geofencing from Felicia today. I will give you some examples that we're into right now. We're having a discussion in the planning stage with a smaller city in Sweden, and they would like to secure the maximum speed. And the focus is personal and goods delivery. So it's taxis, it's goods deliveries, and it's buses. And that there we would like to have an area around the city as well as in the city center where you can't speeding. Another company a big timber company in Sweden, they're using geofencing to control max speed when they are going through small villages where you only have one road, where people walk to school, to the shop, or the big lorries coming through these small villages, and they geofenced through them, especially outside schools and in the city small city center, and have good experience of that as well. So it's really something you can use in another way, and it's not something that you regulate from the state. It's you have a commitment between several parts that you can use this. So when we're talking about speeds and speeding and non-speeding, we need to focus much more about the leadership. What can the leadership in the society, those companies that are doing a lot of transports, how can we in a better way commit that we will not speed? And today we have so much more good tools to use. And with that, thank you for me.
Thanks a lot. And as I said, it's okay to write some questions in the Q&A. If you have any to Maria. And I haven't seen anyone, but one question that I have saved for the discussion in the end is actually to say when can we change from always discussing the conflict of interest rather than the synergy with all the other goals and so on. Because I mean, I know you're very in favor of that, but I think you could say some words about this, because I think it's really a bit strange in my view that we haven't had more support from other sustainability goals when it comes to lower speeds.
Yeah. No, so normally when we talk about speed, it's very often road safety, and as you say, we have much more in common and a lot to gain when talking about non-speeding or low, smooth speeds through city centers as well. So and right now we have so many forces that has to do with that children should be able to walk, or all people should be able to walk and cycle, and having these public transports in a larger scale. And so it's really supporting many things that has to do with quality, security, air quality as well. So I think it's harder to find the conflicts than the synergies.
I've got one question about this geofencing. Is that a Swedish or Stockholm and Gothenburg thing only, or is it used in other areas?
I know that London is looking into it, but the technique exists. It has to do with the vehicle, and a lot of vehicles have this opportunity. So if you have a vehicle that is connected and a certain kind of software that most of them already have, you can use this, but you have to have a discussion, and maybe you start with that. For instance, it's easier with a bus that going the same direction, same road all the time. Then you put the map in the vehicle, so the vehicle always know when it's on that road or in that area. You can't be speeding. It's a technique that you can use then. So it's nothing to do with Sweden.
And then I got some question about I translated to the stick or the carrot. What do you think will be the main reason for instance, a company that because they have, i.e. the government or the local authority requires it, or that IKEA wants it for their brand? Which of these two do you think is the most promising future for geofencing?
I think we have to work on both ways. So it's both about procurement and saying this is what the society would like to have, but it's also about safe working conditions. I mean, if you have more, you have responsibility for your employees, and you are also some kind of responsibility for third party. You can't just hit pedestrians and cyclists because the vehicles are speeding, for instance. So it's both a value and an important that you're taking care of the occupational health and safety, and you have a responsibility for that. And this is one way of doing it, because consequences in traffic is one of the most challenging health problem that most companies have. So I think it's both something that you have to take care of by yourself, and this is a good way of doing it. But also we need to have a stick on the other side, that using the procurement, for instance.
Yeah, it's interesting, as you say, that it's the professional drivers are driving faster than the others, and they are driving in less safe vehicles as well, in many ways. So, and that could be a change, because occupational safety in many other areas are very, very, how should I say, cautious and on safety aware.
Yeah.
And I'm an example. You could climb on your roof just with a ladder, but not a professional builder will do that. They will have a proper scaffolding and so on.
That's right.
So I have to look here at my. I don't think I've really any other questions. I think that these issues about the change to new technology, and maybe you should say something about the possibility to spread it all over the world, so to say, because quite often we say, well, that's the new fancy cars and the fancy issues, but the ability to spread it around the world.
That's what I think. It's by working with these sustainability reporting, and that especially large companies have a responsibility for the road safety footprints, and these are tools that are already on the market, and you will gain the good thing from them also when they're driving in other countries. So I think this is a quite faster way of spreading, having a more road safe traffic on a global level, and not only discussing what we can do in the high income countries, and then much later it comes into other countries. So this is really something, a tool that would gain on a global level.
Now I've got a very concrete question. Could you explain a little bit what you mean by in the value chain? How is that measured? How is that defined?
Yes, yeah. And the word value chain for us in the road safety community, it's not that common. But if you're talking in a company and describing their value chain and have a control of, for instance, it's when it comes to transports, it's both, what do you call that? From you're picking up the raw material, and the transport starts there. So it's picking up the material for the product that you would like to do, and also all the way out to the customers on the other side. So it's both upstreams and downstreams in the whole value chains. All transports you are doing, all transports you are buying, all transports in the supplier chains. So there's a lot of value chains for a company. So you have to describe what are the value chains for our own employees, what are the value chains when it comes to delivery to the customers, for instance. So it depends on what kind of industry you are. I mean, for us, for the Swedish Transport Administration, our main value chain is about what happens on our streets. But we also have a value chain for transports that we are buying, and also those that the employees are doing when they're going back and forward to work.
Thank you ever so much, Maria. And now we will get used to having value chain as one of our normal vocabulary in traffic safety.
Perfect.
And that will be very useful and could be spread very well. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
And I will now give the floor to Jenny Carlson. And it's actually Jenny who is who we should thank for this this event, because you've done all the work and all the fiddling with the presenters and everything. So now you should not only administrate, you will present ETSC work on traffic on speed, and of course that is the majority of ETSC's work, isn't it?
Yes, thank you, Lars. It's very much a joint effort, but thank you for your kind words. So yeah, so my name is Jenny. I work on the PIN program here at ETSC, and I'm going to just do a little run through of some of the findings, the data, the information, the good practices that we found whilst writing our own reports on speed within the PIN program. A little bit about the PIN program, the Road Safety Performance Index program. Ellen mentioned earlier, it's been going since 2006. So we have 32 countries participating, all the EU member states, and then the UK, Norway, Switzerland, the Republic of Serbia, and Israel. And it's about ranking the road safety performance of those countries. But it's also about inspiring by sharing good practice. We give an award. So it's a mixture of the two. We publish every year an annual report in June, looking at progress towards reducing road deaths and serious injuries. We also produce thematic reports. I'll talk about two today, one on speed and one on enforcement that we've published in the past. And yes, we also organize a number of PIN talks every year, including this one. Along the bottom there of the screen, you can see the partners in the PIN program, and we're very grateful to them, obviously, for their support. So what can we say about speed? What did we find in our publications? We know that speed is a major factor in overall road safety performance. Excessive, inappropriate speed is an aggravating factor in most collisions. In a speed PIN report that we published in 2019, we calculated that 2,100 lives could be saved each year if the average speed dropped by just 1 kilometer per hour on roads across the EU. I also just wanted to give this percentage, the statistic that I've taken from the latest Commission publication, that we're trying to focus a bit on rural roads in this PIN talk. So I just wanted to show that 53% of all road deaths occurred on roads outside urban areas, so just over half. But what do we find about speed in our speed PIN flash? So we looked here at the observed vehicle speeds going above the speed limit. You're going to hear from Peter just after me about the new key performance indicator from the EU, which looks at speeds within the speed limit. But here we looked at speeds above the speed limit. It was before the EU KPI had come out. So here's what we found on the different roads, the observed vehicle speeds. So you can see that they range between the PIN countries on rural roads from 9% above the speed limit to 63%. It is quite a big range. Also urban roads, 35% to 75%. So this is this is what we found in terms of the observed speed and speeding on the different road types. So what can we do? We know that speed is an important factor. We know that speeding exists. speed management, what can we do to manage it? We know there's no silver bullet. We need a range of measures. We need a holistic approach. And I'm going to talk through some of the things that the factors that we believe are important when managing speed. So safe and credible speed limits, infrastructure, traffic calming, self-explaining, self-enforcing roads. I'll talk more about what that means. Enforcement is obviously a key element of speed management, and vehicle technologies, and also other technologies. We've just heard from Maria about geofencing. So there are a lot of technologies that are coming on board to help manage speed. So safe speed limits. What do we know about safe speed limits? These are the speed limits that, according to the safe system, are the most appropriate. So we have 30 kilometers on urban roads, 70 on rural roads without a median barrier, and 100 on rural roads with a median side barriers. That having been said, I think we still know that speed limits on much of the road network in the EU are higher than the protected quality of the roadside and the vehicle design allow. So we know what the safe system would suggest in terms of speed limits, but I think in reality the speed limits on most of our roads are perhaps too high for the circumstances. So that's safe speed limits. I also mentioned the role of enforcement. So here we have a graph on speeding tickets from an enforcement report that we published in March last year. Enforcement is difficult to measure. Ideally, we'd have an indicator on enforcement in terms of the hours of the time spent on enforcement, but that's quite difficult to get from most PIN countries. So what we use instead is we look at speeding tickets, and we use this as a proxy for sort of enforcement efforts. It's not ideal, but it's what we have. So here we look at the change in the number of speeding tickets per 1,000 population over a 10-year period, and we can see how those numbers have changed. And from this graph, you can see that on the whole, speeding tickets seem to be increasing in PIN countries. Here I have another table from our enforcement report. I've cut this table in half, so you're seeing the top of the table and the bottom of the table, and there are many more countries in between. But here we look at the number of speeding tickets per 1,000 population within the PIN countries. And you can see here, just by looking at the top and the bottom of the table, there's quite a big difference in terms of the number. You've got the Netherlands there, 2019, let's say 395 tickets per 1,000 population, whereas in Ireland in the same year, 28. So there's a big difference there. Also, in terms of the number of them that were by a speed camera, that also varies a great deal as well between the countries. When we talk about enforcement, we obviously can't talk about enforcement. We're talking about cross-border enforcement, particularly within the European Union. Cross-border enforcement is a very important element. We have a directive on it, and we asked our PIN countries if they could provide us with data on using the cross-border enforcement directive and offences committed by non-residents. And you can see here 10 countries were able to provide us with that data. And progress has been made since 2015, but you can see that certainly when it comes to the proportion of the offences followed up that were paid, there's still work to be done. And with that in mind, just a small word about the revision of the Cross-Border Enforcement Directive, which was just published, the proposal was just published in March. So we welcome that proposal. It's obviously trying to help get more of those fines, those offences followed up and paid. Also, just a quick word on the union-wide driving disqualification proposal. Obviously, this it's very complementary to the CBE, the Cross-Border Enforcement Directive, and we welcome that also at ETSC. So that's enforcement. We talk about safe speeds. We talked about enforcement. Now the technologies. I'm just going to focus here on intelligent speed assistance, ISA. Under the General Safety Regulation, obviously ISA became mandatory for all new vehicles, new models in 22, and for current models by 2024. ISA involves feedback provided through an accelerator control or an audible warning, and it's the default will be that ISA will be always on. Drivers can switch it off or override it, but one speed limit at a time. There is a review clause to adapt to technical progress, and we're going to certainly be following ISA and the technical progress as we get towards that review clause. In the meantime, Euro NCAP is going to be encouraging manufacturers to improve speed limit detection. What do we know about ISA? So research estimates that it can reduce road deaths by up to 30%. There's less noise, less pollution as speeds are kept down, as traffic is potentially flows better. And ISA helps drivers avoid speeding tickets. It's there to help drivers as well. And it really forms part of this Vision Zero that we have signed up to, in terms of moving away from blaming road users who make mistakes. It's the safe system approach as well. People make mistakes, and ISA helps share that responsibility, the road safety responsibility, with system designers. Lastly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about infrastructure. I talked about safe speeds, credible speeds. Roads can also be self-enforcing, and so that it feels natural to drive a certain speed on a certain road. And infrastructure plays a big role here. I've listed a number here of engineering measures that can be taken. And I just put a little shout out to Szarłowno, sorry for my Polish pronunciation, a town in Poland that we included in a recent PIN report on urban road safety. And they've done a lot of measures, including 30 kilometers per hour, but a lot of infrastructure measures as well. And they used EU funds for that. So it's an interesting example of how you can reduce road deaths by making changes to speed limits, but also to infrastructure. And I should perhaps say on all of this, in all our reports, we have a number of examples from different countries. Certainly in our speed report, we have information from Sweden about what they have done in terms of measuring speed, infrastructure to reduce speed on their roads. So there's lots of examples within our PIN reports on how to do these things if you want to read further. So we have data in our PIN reports. We have the latest research and information, and we take all this and we produce a series of recommendations. Now, I've taken here the image that we created from the recommendations in the speed report that we published. There are many, many more in our in the report itself. But yeah, here are some of them. I've mentioned a lot of them already. So safe and credible speed limits, self-explaining, self-enforcing roads, vehicles that help drivers stick to the speed limit, stricter laws, so that if you do speed, you are dealt with appropriately. Road user education. A lot of people are still under the impression that speeding is about making money, but we need to change the narrative. We need to help people understand why keeping speeds down is important for road safety. And law enforcement, we've spoken a lot about that as well. Just on enforcement, I mentioned we had an enforcement flash, just an enforcement report just last year. So here are some of the recommendations that we had particularly focused on enforcement. We recommend to channel the revenues back. Like I say, some people think it's still about making money, but it's not. If you channel those revenues back into road safety work, that can perhaps be part of the message. Set targets for your checks and the compliance. A demerit point system can be useful. Large-scale enforcement actions, campaigns. We've seen them as well at an EU level from Roadpol. We now have the proposal for a directive on cross-border enforcement. So we welcome that, and that recommendation has been followed up. So thank you very much. Here is a link to the PIN website. We have the two reports, like I say, one on speed, one on enforcement. We have another one on urban cycling. So speed features, I think, probably in the majority of our PIN reports, and you're very welcome to read them at your leisure. Thank you very much.
Thank you ever so much, Jenny. It's interesting to see that speed is still, after all this year, one of the main problem. But you've shown us some positive, encouraging insight in new tools, and also when it comes to responsibility, it's not always the problem sitting right behind the steering wheel. It's somewhere else in the boardroom and whatever. And talking about that, I will give the floor to Peter Silberans, who is a road expert at the VIAS Institute in Belgium. And you have been responsible and running this first KPI project called Baseline, and KPI is Key Performing Indicator. Could you please tell us more about this project? The floor is yours, Peter.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to present the results of the Baseline project. I hope, and please, can you confirm that I'm sharing my screen right now?
Yes, we can see it. It's not in the presentation mode, but now it is, and we're happy for that.
Thank you very much. I was afraid I would be struggling with the technology, but everything seems to work fine. So the Baseline project, I will try to focus mainly on the results on speed in this presentation, but at the same time, I'm giving a general introduction to the entire Baseline project, which ran from 2020 until 2023. Results and reports are available only since March this year. I included links to all the reports and results in the upcoming slides. Project was co-funded by the European Commission and was on a harmonized measurements of road safety key performance indicators, to which formally 19 countries participated in the consortium of the Baseline project. We collaborated with other EU countries that also provided results that we included in the reports and the analysis. The starting point for the project was this very important policy document called EU Road Safety Policy Framework 2130, Next Steps Towards Vision Zero. It served as a key reference point for all the work that has been conducted in the Baseline project, because first of all, it defines the key performance indicators to which we were asked to look into. These concern indicators directly related to the prevention of road accident fatalities and serious injuries, but not regarding the accident statistics themselves. Here you can see a list of the indicators that were included in the project. We're talking for speed on the percentage of vehicles traveling within the speed limit. We have similar KPIs for safety belt, alcohol, distraction, etc. And we also had 3 technical indicators at the level of vehicle safety infrastructure and post-crash care. But I'll try to focus mainly on the work done on the KPI for speed in this presentation. But also for the KPI on speed, it was similar as for the other KPIs regarding behavior in traffic. We followed the same methodological framework for speed as for the other behavioral KPIs, in a sense that for all behavioral KPIs that refer to respect of certain types of road traffic rules, we based the estimates of compliance with these rules on direct observation or measurement. So not self-reported data, but direct observation by human observers posted by the side of the road, or with, in the case of speed, mostly speed radars, sometimes also cameras, based on sample of locations across all the national road network in order to make inferences on the percentage of compliance of all road users. For the non-behavioral KPIs, we followed a different logic, which was mainly based on the exploitation of existing databases. Important aspects of the methodology is that we developed detailed methodological guidelines for all the KPIs, in which we defined minimal requirements to which all the participating countries should comply in order to assure as comparable as possible estimates for all the KPIs. When I talk about the percentage of road users respecting speed limits, we always refer to the total of all kilometers driven on a certain road network, which was realized through statistical weighting of the results according to information on the distribution of these kilometers driven across the national road network. So key elements are that we realized this by direct observation in case of speed, mostly 24/7 radar measurements that measured the speed of all vehicles passing by. On the next slide, you'll see some examples of how this was implemented in practice. We also used a common database format, a common framework for statistical analysis of the data and quality assurance procedures in order to assure comparability of the results between the different countries. Reports might be a bit difficult to find, but they're included on a special dedicated website for the baseline project, and they're also included in the statistics and analysis part of the website of DG Move. I included the links to the publications on the previous slide. In this slide, I copy-pasted the methodological requirements that were defined in the Commission staff working document, so the EU policy framework document. And I think in order to be short, I would like to emphasize specifically the fact that the KPI that we measured in the baseline project for speed refers to free flow traffic. In practice, this was implemented in 2 ways. One, we only took into account in the results cars for which 5 seconds ahead of the car, no other car was driving, assuring a free choice of speed of all the vehicles included in the measurements. Also, we did not include locations where either safety cameras were posted or other infrastructure elements could influence speed. This is related to a common methodological framework that was already developed in 2007 within the safety net project. It is not a complete KPI definition that covers all aspects of speed, but this choice had been made because it allows to monitor the evolution of behavior in terms of respect for the speed limits over time. So that was a key definition, also defined by the European Commission in several working groups. Here you can see how we went about it in practice in terms of the minimal requirements that we asked all countries to adhere to, which mainly referred to measuring a representative sample of locations across all road types on weekdays, on daylight hours. Most countries did 24/7 measurements, some didn't, but that was the main focus of the indicator defined by the Commission. In terms of practical implementation, we sought a balance between feasibility and affordability on the one hand, and statistical generalizability on the other hand, with, in this case, a minimum of 2,000 observations and 500 observations per road type at a minimum of 10 locations per road type. This was defined having in mind also the possibility to measure speeds by means of human-operated laser guns. In most cases, we had millions of observations through automated cameras. In the report, the general evaluation is that most countries managed to adhere to the minimal requirements, allowing to assure comparability between countries, but an important limiting factor in the project was that, of course, differences in speed limits are in part also due to the strategy in setting speed limits for specific types of roads, creating the fact that for the same type of roads with a lower speed limit will lead in general to lower compliance than in countries where the speed limits are set at a higher level. These are also aspects to be kept in mind when looking at the results, which are included in the report, for which you can see the link here. Jenny already made a general reference to the results included in the baseline project. I think it was correct. The main emphasis that you can see in this graph, which gives you the percentage of compliance with the speed limits across different types of roads, is that there is really huge variability both between countries as between types of roads in terms of the percentage of respect of the speed limits. Please bear in mind that this is free flow speed only, and that results should be interpreted also with that in mind. Given the huge variance, you will see a lot of countries with far from ideal respect for the speed limitations, which shows clearly a very high potential for further reducing accidents due to speed. So this is one of the examples of the types of results you can find in the report. Of course, percentage of compliance, including 1 kilometer per hour over speeding, is only one way to look at the indicator for speed. We also included in the report the average speed per speed limits for specific types of roads for all countries able to provide these results, which show that in general also a lot of variation, but average speeds are mainly or often around the speed limit set for particular types of roads. And also we included in the report the V85 per speed limits, which gives you the speed which is respected by 85 of the free flow traffic road users, which is often seriously above the speed limit, and which is an indicator of the degree of severity of the offenses detected during the measurements. Since this meeting mainly focuses on urban areas, last slide of results I included in this presentation is compliance on low speed limit roads, particularly on 30 km/h roads and 50 km/h roads. You will see on average that the percentage of infractions is between 30 and 60, sometimes close to 70%, which is really dramatic and a point of attention for speed management on urban roads. You'll find other details in the reports as well, for which I won't have the time to give a detailed discussion today. Results on motorcycle speeds for 7 countries, also specific results on speeds adopted by vans and small trucks on the one hand, also trucks, buses, and heavy goods vehicles on the other hand, and different other interesting breakdowns. So in terms of conclusion and recommendations, I used a slide with the general conclusions and recommendations, not particular for speed, to end this presentation. We made an attempt for all 8 KPIs to do international benchmarking across Europe, which showed for most KPIs strong international variations in performance, which also show huge potential for improvement in the areas investigated. An aspect that we did not yet include in the baseline project were contextual factors explaining the variances observed, which in the case of speed might be clearly related to the strategy in setting speed limits for particular types of roads. But we think the baseline project laid a good basis for future work in the area of KPIs. And actually, I should draw everybody's attention to the fact that the project didn't end with the end of the baseline project and the publication of the results. Currently, there's a follow-up project going on to which even more EU countries participated, also funded by the European Commission, which is the Trendline project, which will continue to do measurements on the 8 KPIs cited before and on the other experimental indicators over the coming years. You can find all the information available on the Trendline project on a dedicated website that I included in this slide as well. In terms of benchmarking and methodology, there's still work to be done. Baseline was, as the name says, a first attempt to create a baseline for starting to monitoring evolution over time. But we noticed and included in all the different reports several aspects of the methodology in terms of harmonized reporting and measurement that can still be improved, but that will be further developed in the Trendline project. And I hope I managed to respect the timing foreseen for this presentation in this way.
Thank you ever so much, Peter. You were very well with the time. Thanks. And it's as a researcher, I'm always so joyful when you come to good data, comparable data. That's the real joy. Talking about joy, my professor told me that the breaks are always the most important one, and now it's actually it's time for a break, 11:15, or if you're not in our time zone, so in some 12 minutes or so we will meet again. And if you should pretend that you're chatting or talking in the corridor or outside, you could always write something in the chat. Otherwise, it's a good time to grab a cup of coffee or water. At least I will do that. So see you again 11:15. So, thank you all. Welcome back from the break, and I'm so happy that all of you are back and there is no noise in the back of the conference room, so we could actually start on time. And I will give the floor directly to Manuel Salaté, Secretary General of the French Road Safety Observatory. And the title is Reducing Speed on Rural Roads in France. So the floor is yours, and it's so interesting that France maybe is the most interesting country when it comes to speed and speed limits. So we're so much looking forward to that. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for inviting me today. I'll try and share the experience we trying to reduce speed on our rural network. What I mean by rural network is network outside built-up areas and outside ways and dual carriageways. So it can mean roads that are quite significantly wide and well maintained, but still are single carriageways. So I'm Manuel Salaté. I'm head of the French Road Safety Observatory. And I've been at this position for the past 10 years. So I was able to witness all the previous studies and experiments that were carried out before this measure was taken in 2018 of lowering the speed limit from 90 to 80 kilometers per hour. Here. France at a glance, what you need to know about France, we've got 66 million inhabitants for a surface area of 600,000 square kilometer and an exposure of 600 billion vehicle kilometer. The number of road traffic fatalities back in 2017 was 3,700. Most of our population lives in urban areas, 80%, but we at the time 63% of our road traffic fatalities were on that network, non-motorway network outside built-up areas, which is way above the European average, that is below 50%. So that was identified as a very a network we wanted to target in order to reduce significantly the number of fatalities. Timeline, and there was a scientific timeline. Since 2012 we had 2 presidents, and the fact that they were with the first president there was a 2020 target set, as in all European countries, and then some advice from the National Road Safety Council to reduce the speed limit, and that advice was on the first studies on the topic by Serema. You can see on the scientific timeline we had both studies and research and reports that were carried out by French experts or by international bodies like ETSC or IRTAD, the ITF OECD on speed. So that was helpful in order to identify the potential impact of reducing the speed and the extent to which we wanted that measure to be implemented to feed the decision that was taken on the 9th January 2018 to be implemented on the 1st July 2018. The first thing is that fatalities occur first on roads where the traffic is, and which is why I put 3 photographs here of roads that are quite wide and straight, others that are with some bends, and others that are very small roads. And all those 3 types of roads were targeted. There was no exception because studies that were carried out before the measure identified that 38% of fatalities on non-motorway roads outside built-up areas occur on the first 10% main rural roads. 55% of fatalities occur on the first 20% main rural roads, and 64% on the first 30% main rural roads. So it was not, we were able to say that it was not a good idea to say, well, this measure will be implemented only on the local rural roads and not on the main rural roads, because that would then we would have had a very limited impact on road safety. We did make an exception when on those main roads were overtaking stretches, even though there was no separation, but the stretches where we had 3 or 4 lane sections, but it was a very small number of kilometers, 5,000 kilometers out of more than 400,000 for the rest. So the lesson learned from those studies was that on a mature network, fatalities occur where the traffic flows, therefore on the nice and comfortable roads. And this is where it's very difficult to explain to members of the public, because this is where they want to speed up. So that was the first thing. Just to present here the fatality trend that we've had in France since the Second World War. In red on the right hand side graph, you've got the number of fatalities. So we went up to 18,000 fatalities in 1972, and then this is where most speed limits were put in place on the French road network, whether it's on motorways, on rural roads, and in cities. Then we implemented automated speed cameras in 2002, and then we had a second big drop from the 8,000 fatalities to around a bit more than 3,000. What happened on the 1st July 2018? The graph on the left-hand side presents what we were able to monitor at certain locations before and after the change on the 1st of July 2018. And you've got the average speeds measured per day in June 2019 and then July. And what is very significant that on the first day where the measure was implemented, and that was a national measure, so there was virtually no need to change the signs on the side of the road, because that was a national speed limit on that network that just went from 90 to 80. And on the very first day, which was a Sunday, we had that effect of decreasing the speed practiced by the vehicles. So that was really, we were very surprised that it was that dramatic, especially on a Sunday. People could think, well, police officers are not on the roads on a Sunday, so it's going to start really on a Monday, and no, the speed decreased on the very first day. We looked at how the speed decreased between light vehicles, passenger cars on the left and HGVs on the right. In France at the time, the speed limit for passenger cars was 90 and then went to 80. But for HGVs, the speed limit was already of 80 kilometers per hour, and it wasn't changed by these new regulations. But still, the speed practice, the speed driven by HGVs had a decrease because the general flow decreased, and they didn't feel as much pressure to respect the maximum 80 as before, because that was the flow of everybody. And I remember my son was doing accompanied driving at the time, and these drivers have got a speed limit of 80, and he said, "Oh, it's nice now. I don't feel the pressure of other cars that are not happy that I'm limited at 80 and they can drive at 90." Looking at the speed distributions before and after. So it's the dark blue, and the afterlines month by month from August 2018 to July 2019. You can see how dramatically the distribution of passenger vehicles changed and decreased as a result. Another way to look at the impact of the measure is to look at the relative trend between non-motorway network outside urban areas and the rest of the network, which is urban areas and motorways, and what happened with the number of fatalities. And we can see that in the summer 2018, the trends do separate themselves. We've got a relative decreasing trend on the non-motorway network outside urban areas, and a slightly increasing trend on the rest of the network. So we do have a separation of trends. We looked at journey time following that implementation with 300 sections of 30 kilometers read itineraries and looking at how the GPS providers were estimating the time to drive those 30-kilometer itineraries before and after the implementation of the measure. And we found out that most, well, a third of the itineraries even had a slightly time saving. More than a third noticed a travel delay under 1 second per kilometer, and 12% have a travel delay higher than 2 seconds per kilometer. So that's very, very low. And that is explained by the fact that on these rural roads, you never drive at the top, well, you don't drive at the top speed limit, at the speed limit all the time, because you've got the bands, you've got some built-up areas that you need to cross, even though they're not proper cities. And all in all, over a 30-kilometer itinerary that is a realistic itinerary, a commuting trip. It's important to say that decreasing by 10 kilometers per hour speed limit only introduced an average 1 second per kilometer delay, which means 30 seconds. So it's not the difference of 10 kilometers per hour multiplied by 30 kilometers that makes the difference. And that is important because in some people that don't agree with the speed limit will say that the time loss is huge, and I'm going to waste 15 more minutes to get to work, and that's not right. We had user surveys before and after that were carried out, one before and several afterwards, with 5,000 respondents initially, and then 3,000 because that was enough. We were, for the before study, we wanted to make sure we had a good coverage and went big, and then we identified that with 3,000 that was okay to carry out our study for the after studies. And there was a reduction of well, initially people were not in favor of the measure, but they were planning to comply always or nearly always with the speed limit. So that was important, that they intended to comply. And after study, when they experienced this new speed limit, the opponents, number of opponents decreased. I've got a few graphs presenting that, with the to the left the before survey, with in dark green and green and light green the absolutely in favor and rather in favor of the measure, and the in orange and red the rather against and totally against the measure. So that is in for the a sample representative of the French population, the whole French population. So you can see that progressively the number of people in favor increase. In rural areas, the number of people in favor are not as is not as important as overall France, but still it carries on increasing as well. The buy-in increases with time. And another graph presents what men and women think. And well, yeah, as you can see, for both gender, buy-in increases with time, but each time women buy more into the measure than men. Another study that was carried out, and that was before the implementation, by an entity that studies air quality, and what they were anticipating from this measure was a reduction of greenhouse gases by 3% at most, and that would depend on the HGV share in traffic. So if you've got 50% HGV share in traffic, depending on the pollutants, you're between 0.5%, minus 0.5% to 3% for NO2. And if you've got fewer HGVs in traffic, the reduction, the speed limit reduction will have a more significant impact. All in all, what Cerema identify in terms of gains and loss for the socioeconomic evaluation was a big gain thanks to the accidents saved, CO2 emissions reduced, and fuel savings as well, and some time delay that was lower than the gains. It's important to look at this type of chart because as we had an pre-evaluation of the impact before implementing the measure, we looked also at reducing speed on motorways, and you don't have at all the same type of balance because you've got a more severe time delay. So the impact was more than 300 lives saved over 20 months. So a highly effective and low-cost measure, strong decrease of fatalities, and an ongoing increase in acceptability over time. A difficult way forward, as that was Prime Minister decision, and local authorities were not happy with that. And they obtained a law in December 2018 that they can raise back to 90 on selected roads. So not for the trunk road network. So basically the biggest roads are still at 80 kilometers per hour. We did on the was a bit difficult because we had those 2 years of COVID. So basically, thanks to the reduction in traffic, fatalities decreased everywhere. But we looked at, we had about 40% by 2021, 40% of the raised back to 90, and looking at the different types of counties, the mountain counties, the rural counties, so there was that classification. We looked at them and looked at the 80 group and the 90 group in those types of counties. And for each of those types, the reduction in fatalities was bigger when the counties were at 80 than when they had raised back to 90. And we estimated that on a normal year, on an annual year, we would have 250 additional deaths based on what we saw with the raising of the 90 to the 90. As a conclusion, I need to highlight that the speed limit change does not only impact the accidents that were due to speed, but it decreased all accident risk, because whichever the risk factor, speed has a very particular is a very particular factor that targets everything. The one other thing I want to stress is that dangerous roads are no longer those we drivers think, and this makes it complicated in communication, because the severe crashes occur obviously where the traffic is. If you've got a very dangerous road and nobody drives on it, you haven't got an accident there. That's it for me. So you can find the information on our website with the different publications that were made. Thanks very much.
Thanks ever so much.
I hope I wasn't too long.
Yeah, but we're slightly delayed, but we can take that up in the discussion later on. So with no further ado, I will give the floor to Felicia Hökars, project manager of the Smart Urban Traffic Zones project. So now we actually a little bit back to what Maria talked about, geofencing and things like that. So the floor is yours, Felicia.
Thank you so much. So yeah, my name is Felicia, or you can see my presentation, right? Good. So yeah, my name is Felicia Hökars, and I work as a project manager at Closer Lindelman Science Park. And first of all, I just want to say thank you for inviting me to this webinar. It's been really interesting presentations this far. So I will talk about the project Smart Urban Traffic Zones. And this is a project that's been founded by Vinnova, the Swedish Innovation Agency, and was co-managed by Closer and the Swedish Transport Administration. And as it's stated in the project name, this is a project that's been conducted in an urban environment. But I believe that some of the technical solutions that I will present today also can be applied in other contexts, like a rural context, for instance, at least variations of these solutions. So I hope you will find this presentation interesting and bring some new ideas, both for rural and urban, in the urban and rural context. So a little bit short about the project. So the aim of Smart Urban Traffic Zones is to create smart solutions in the city that contribute to increased flexibility in how we use urban space, more efficient transport, and increased traffic safety. And this we do by using digital tools such as geofencing, connected sensors, and digital message signs. And we have already mentioned geofencing several times today, and I will mention it a lot during this presentation. So just to be clear, what I mean with a geofence is that it's a digitally defined geographical area where vehicles are controlled by digitally set rules, allowing control of how a vehicle is driving within the zone. And this without any human intervention. So this could, for example, be speed control of a vehicle. And in this project, 19 partners from a wide range of different types of organizations have been involved. And the project period was from September 2020 to September 2022. And currently we have a new phase going on, but I will focus on the last phase in this presentation since we don't have any new results in the current phase we just recently started. But if you're interested in the current phase, please reach out to me afterwards and I will tell you about it as well. So what have we done in this project? So as you can see on the slide here, we have had 3 pilots demonstrating different concepts of smart zones. So, and I will in this presentation focus on the first 2 since they are most related to speed control of vehicles, which is the topic of today. And all these pilots have been performed in Sweden in real environments, 1 test in Gothenburg and 2 of them in Stockholm in different locations. And as you can see here on the maps, the concept of zones we have in the project, and you can see that they are quite different in the size, but I will tell you more about that later. Okay, so let's start with the first one. Innovation Zone Hornsgatan. So here we have tested speed adaptation of the delivery vehicles depending on the number of pedestrians in an area. So basically, we had a sensor mounted that counted the amount of people in the area you can see the map here. And this area is characterized by a lot of shops, stores, we have restaurants, a subway station close by, and also a school. So it's a lot of people moving in this area. And the participating vehicles were delivery trucks that delivered groceries to stores and restaurants in this area. So basically we had that sensor mounted that counted the amount of people. And when it reached a certain limit, the vehicles that was participating in the test was speed controlled from 30 kilometers to 20 kilometers per hour. So they could, in other words, not drive faster than 20 when a lot of people was moving in the area. And this to increase the safety then for the pedestrians. So under normal condition, or when it wasn't that much people, the vehicle were geofenced to 30 kilometers per hour, which is the official speed limit in this area. So the result of this showed that it was technically feasible to create a smart zone for dynamic speed control of vehicles. The technology worked really well. What we could measure, what we could see from the measurement was a slight improvement in lower average speed when the vehicles were geofenced to 20 in comparison to 30 kilometers per hour. However, it was quite challenging to measure this, since we had a traffic signal in the middle of the zone that affected the speed a lot. And the drivers that was participating, they had an overall positive view on the system. When we conducted the interviews with them, they expressed that the speed control was a nice support for them when driving. So they expressed that they could focus more on the overall traffic situation than making sure that they were keeping the correct speed at all times. Although there were some minor speed violations within the test, or within the zone when we did the test with the participating vehicles. And we believe that this could be due to the rather small size of the zone. So if the driver had a high speed into the zone, it was sometimes not enough time to lower it until they were out of the zone again, because we didn't have any active braking in the test. So to achieve a higher level of certainty in the evaluation of the smart zone's impact on road safety, the setup would need to be tested in a bigger zone, more location, as well as with more participating vehicles to collect data. So this was primarily a technical test, and it was really successful, it worked. But next time it should also be tested where we have more speeding issues to see the actual impact. So the second pilot, this is called digitally issued exemptions for construction transport. And here we look into a solution to increase transport efficiency, and in the meantime, lowering speed on heavy construction transport within urban areas where a lot of people is moving around. So this pilot included one heavy mass transport vehicle, a concrete truck, that delivered concrete to construction sites in Stockholm, in an area called Södermalm. You can see here on the map. So under normal conditions, it's not allowed to load these concrete vehicles to its full capacity due to the limitation of the bearing capacity of the road infrastructure. So in other words, the truck will be too heavy if you load them fully. So this pilot therefore depended on the city issuing an exemption to be able to carry a heavier load than normal, but with the condition that it was driving in a low speed. So in this pilot, we demonstrated a geofencing solution that reduced the speed of the vehicle if it was too heavy. And then the speed was reduced from 30 kilometers per hour to 15 kilometers per hour when entering the geofencing zone. So the main idea was that a lower speed compensates for the heavier load of the vehicle by reducing the vibrations created by the vehicle, and it would thereby not have negative impact in the road infrastructure. And overall, this demonstration was also successful when it comes to the technical feasibility. It worked, the technology to reduce the speed from 30 to 15 kilometers when carrying a heavier load. We also evaluated the vibrations transmitted into the surrounding built environment, and we're able to verify that the lowered speed ensured that the vibration caused by the vehicle was not harmful. So that was also an interesting result. So the main challenge for this pilot to scale up is not related to technology, but regulations for transport exemptions. So that we need to look more into if we're gonna scale up this. So lastly, we have a third pilot, and as I said in the beginning, it's not related to speed, so I won't go into telling this pilot, but it's called Safe Construction Site Exits. And in short, this pilot aimed to increase the safety for vulnerable road users at construction site exits. So a smart zone was created around the construction site exits to reduce collision risk between construction transport and cyclists. So if you want to know more about this one, also please reach out to me afterwards or read at the web page. I have a link I can send you in the chat. Okay, so that was the end of my presentation. And here you can see all the participating partners in the project. And thank you for listening.
Thank you ever so much. It's interesting to see new tools that are really not only fantasy, but actually working on the ground. And now we have almost half an hour for a time of discussion. And I have got quite a few questions, some rather detailed, but I will actually start to give one question to whom who want to reply on that, and that is actually from my mentor and professor Christer Hedén, who raised the issue of the moral issues here, because it's kind of interesting that we have not that much emphasis on the moral consequences or the moral aspect of this, because normally we have quite high moral concerns when it's illegal and when it affects innocent people and specifically children and so on. And that applies very much to speed. But from a moral point of view, we quite often hear much more that it's immoral to waste 1 minute for me because they are driving too slow, rather than putting myself or others at risk. Do you see any change in this perspective? I mean, we have new tools and new players here with the private sector. So, do you see that as have an effect on the moral issue of speeding here? Did you understand my question? Anyone who have to say something about that? But agree that it's rather strange that it's an area where we have the most law violation in compared to any other area in society, and it actually affects others.
Last is Jenny. I maybe just say a bit about this, something I mentioned about making things socially acceptable, and what we've seen, particularly in 30 kilometers, there's been a big drive in a lot of cities. Maria mentioned Paris, Bilbao, Brussels, and there have been some noisy opponents to the schemes, and I think a lot of it comes down to communication, about how you communicate about speed and the need for lower speed limits, and what the benefits of them are. I mentioned it also about enforcement. You know, busting myths about enforcement being revenue raising, and raising more awareness about the lives saved. When it comes to 30 kilometers, Maria mentioned also in Paris, it was about you know, making cities more livable, improving the air quality. So there's a lot of communication work, I think, that has to be done around reducing speed limits, and that maybe then would affect people's opinion on the morals of whether they should, you know, their sort of the freedoms, I suppose, people's freedoms maybe are being, they feel their freedoms are being curtailed by these speed limits. But if the communication is right, perhaps this is would be one step in terms of changing people's mindsets.
In my view, this is where it is very different in built-up areas and outside built-up areas, because in built-up areas, people can imagine themselves as the beneficiary of that measure, because they are more likely to be a pedestrian, to try and cycle. This is where they live. And a lot of people live, and we could see that in our survey, when we were looking at people living in urban areas, well, they were not that shocked because they were not maybe that targeted by something that was more in rural areas, and their commuting was more within the cities. So this is where they were probably more eager to have decreasing speed than people in rural areas, where they spend all the time traveling, commuting, and as a matter of fact, they don't walk much, because they need to go further away than what they could do by walking. So depending on how people imagine that they will be targeted, whether it's in their life as a pedestrian or in their life as a driver, then they can figure out whether they're in favor or against that measure. And if it's the area where they've got their child goes to school, they would be very eager to decrease the speed limit. And if it's their commuting time to be on time somewhere, and then the most important thing is to be on time, not to care for other people's children.
Yeah, and of course, when it comes to communication, we have this knowledge that we have a very loud minority and very, very silent majority who actually benefit from these, and they are not protesting and so on. But when we're into the urban situation, I've got a question here for Peter. When it comes to these KPIs, they seem to be rather weak on the 30 kilometers per hour zones, which are one of the areas where we have the, how should I say, the biggest understanding of the need for a low speed. Is that something that will be improved, or any comments about the data on 30 kilometers per hour zones or roads?
Yeah, from memory, I don't think we have data from a lot of countries on 30 kilometer per hour roads. We have much more data on 50 kilometer per hours. But for the countries for which we have data, compliance is really highly problematic in 30 kilometer per hour zones. In the project, all energy really went into developing a methodology to assure as much as possible comparability between countries. So we didn't really focus on measures or making recommendations to improve the situation. So we expect organizations like ETSC to take a stand to plead for measures to address the issue. I think from a safe systems perspective, you need inside cities and really built up areas, you need 30 km/h speed limits, and then you have to focus on all possible measures to make people comply: enforcement, communication, sanctions. But it's a difficult issue. It relates to what you just said on the fact that there's a big contrast between the moral point of view and the de facto situation that just the social norm, which is reflected in people's behavior, clearly shows that people don't want to respect the speed limit. But we don't, from the baseline project, I really can't give an answer.
No, and you don't measure all those sites that actually have a 50 km/h speed limit that should have had 30. So they should be measured towards 30.
Absolutely.
So I also want to address this, because we have two problems here with speed. One is speed compliance, which we all know, it's easy, but we also have the wrong speed limits. And they are, how should I say, balanced in a bad way. Because if we improve from a safety point of view the speed limits, thus lower them, by definition we get more, or it's more difficult to obey them. And the easiest way to have free speed, because then you have no speed or base problem, which is certainly the wrong way. But I think it's we have two struggles here. It's actually to get a speed limit that is based on safe system approach, survivable speed, livable areas, and so on, and then complying with it. In France, Manuel, you have had this struggle with the acceptance of speed limits and so on.
Well, yes, and I was very unhappy with the European KPI that focused on compliance rather than on average speed, because in my view, it's better to decrease the average speed, whichever the way we manage to do so, whether it's with more enforcement, with decreasing the speed limit. What is interesting is the end goal, with reducing the speed that are driven by the vehicles. And well, if compliance is not as high, well, I must say I don't care. My main goal is to reduce the speed driven by the people, because that is what is real and which has an effect, an impact on road safety.
Yeah, and I certainly agree with that. And then I've got a question here about ISA. And we have done research with ISA for many years and shown that it's good, but the problem is to implement it. But nowadays it seems to be more or less in every vehicle, and the idea of, and combined with geofencing. Jenny or someone from ETSC, can you see any way that will be, how should I be, a really game changer to have a system where we actually have the tools and use them, because we have the tools?
Yeah, we have the tools, and I think the thing to say about ISA, obviously, within the EU, in the General Safety Regulation, it came into force just last year. So it's within the EU, it's there, it's happening. 2024 for existing vehicles. So it's we have Euro NCAP as well, looking at these speed things when they do their testing. But that's very much still within the European bubble. So I suppose the the next step would be to take it beyond Europe's borders. Other NCAPs looking at it, perhaps looking at it at the UN level. So I think it's, you know, at the European level, it's there, we've done it. You know, we have this review clause, we need to see how it's working. But the next step, I think, is to, let's say, I don't know, look at our experience, learn from it, and take it beyond our borders, I think. But yeah, it's very much there, and it's happening. But it's true, it's perhaps early days on the regulatory side of things, particularly at global level.
But we could also address this issue that Maria raised earlier on. That maybe I mean, we don't need the law to use this, but there could be very useful tools when it comes to company imperatives and to have their safety footprints and so on. And Felicia, you have been working together with these companies that are, I mean, willing to do that. Are they doing this because they have to, or because they think it's nice and positive in a way? Can you comment on that?
Yes, of course. So I would say it's mostly goodwill, or they want to do it. They are not forced to do it. So they see this as important for the company brand, that they have good working conditions and they become more environmentally friendly and so on. So I think for them that's participating, this is important question for them, and want to be like within, be a driving force in like change this. So yeah, that's I think their like main perspective why they are within a project like this. And as we talked a little bit earlier about the moral issue, and I hope we can see like a switch in this, because as we've seen in our project that keeping, if it comes from the company to the drivers, that it's very important that you keep the speed, and we also applied in the vehicles. You can't even drive faster than what's allowed. Then it's much less stressful for the drivers when they're out driving, because they are not allowed to on the vehicle. So I think that's a very important way forward, I think, to use these tools in that way.
And it is a remarkable, how should I say, almost trivial result that drivers, professional drivers, should be keen on not having to be illegal in their daily work. So yeah. It's maybe we as a traffic safety community have an old-fashioned view on this, stating that people don't want to drive at decent speed or low speed or safe speed or whatever.
I should say they were skeptical at first with the system, but they got used to it, and after a while they expressed that they liked it.
If I can say give an example of what we did in France with professional drivers, there's some memorandum of understanding that is put forward towards private companies for the employers to engage in road safety attitude, saying that they won't ask from their driver to drive with above the speed limits, that they won't ask them to answer the phone. And it's important it comes from the employer, because even if there is the fact that in France, when with the automated speed cameras, when a lorry driver or professional driver is fined, it's now personal. The company cannot pay for them the fine, and they lose they get their demerit points. on their personal driving license. So it's very personal to the driver, but we need the employer not to ask from them to be illegal because they've got some time delay to respect to get to a certain place. And it's exactly the same as when I was working in winter maintenance, when we would be shutting the roads to HGV drivers, and they would try to go round the closed road because their employer had asked them to be on time at a certain place, and it was much stronger the one who pays them on a monthly basis than the public authority. So it's important that the employer are really part of this, so that employees feel comfortable in abiding by the rules.
Yeah, and we have discussed this as a very important issue to change the responsibility from the driver to the employer and so on, because it's I think that is a very important issue to take care, because in other areas, if I do something wrong in my work, it's the Swedish Transport Administration that have to pay if I make a mistake or we build a road in a bad way. You don't do that personally. So it actually goes back to the company. Thus, they are very keen on that we shouldn't make those mistakes and have control and check and everything. Whereas here we have the opposite. So do you see any way, apart from geofencing, where you could put the responsibility rather for those who pay for the trip or things like that? Anyone who want to comment on that? If not, I have got a question that I think is easier in one way, but more difficult in another. And then we have got some questions regarding power two-wheelers, motorcycles, and in different size. They are a very big problem when it comes to checking, control, and everything that. Have you any experience of that when it comes to from France or geofencing or the in other areas? Because power two-wheelers could be, they are even more sensitive to high speed because they're very vulnerable.
Well, yes, and they do practice more high speed than the other ones. So even though they're more vulnerable, I must admit that in France we used to have a maximum power compulsory for motorbikes, and that's a European directive removes that from us, and we were very unhappy with that because that's more danger for the bikers. So in a way we go back to the argument that why do we have so powerful cars and bikes when the speed limits are not that high, and for bikers it's even more true than for passenger cars. So I think really we can speak about geofencing, but we shouldn't have bikes that are so powerful and so difficult to master.
Sorry, that's just, I think from an ETSC point of view, I think all the same sort of management that's available for cars also applies to power two-wheelers, and you can make certain things very specific, like the road infrastructure in particular can be designed in a certain way to improve safety of power two-wheelers. The technologies for cars that we have for cars, safety technologies are not as advanced on power two-wheelers, so there's there's room for growth there as well. Enforcement as well can be made harder by motorbikers who wear a visor and a helmet which covers their their faces when you have driver liability. So a lot of the same sort of techniques, a lot of the same areas are applicable to power two-wheelers as they are to cars. They just have to perhaps be adapted to the particular circumstances of a power two-wheeler and the vulnerability of a power two-wheeler as well, when it comes to high speeds and a power two-wheeler collision. So I think, yeah, the same messages apply, just perhaps with a slightly different focus.
Is any one of you who know anything about an ISA tool for power two-wheelers? One at a time.
We published a report on power two-wheelers just at the beginning of this year, but I may be looking to my colleagues if I don't think there's ISA for power two-wheelers. They're very different vehicles to cars, and the technology can't always just be transferred across. It's not as simple as that.
But technology-wise, technology-wise, it should be done in a week, I presume. But it's other issues, of course.
I see my colleague Graziella.
Yes.
She can maybe say something.
Yes, thank you, Jenny. Yes, Lars, apparently there are some challenges for the motorcycle to keep the balance, but maybe in the future we find a solution for this. And indeed, it would be very, very welcome if we could reduce speeding from the machine. So either maximum speed limit or a kind of ISA that is adapted for motorcycle would be very, very useful. Or decreasing the power, the maximum power as well. As Manuel mentioned, I was really sorry to hear that it was because of an EU directive that you were impeached of doing this.
Since 2015 or 16, if I remember.
Okay.
All of a sudden, we had a huge increase. But power is not only about speeding; it's also about getting to a certain speed very quickly. And this is an issue for urban areas and for pedestrians. So it's not just the speed, it's also the power to get very quickly to a higher speed than you were, and a higher speed that the other vehicle will be driving, and will be a surprise for pedestrians.
I think we are running to the end, but I want to end with a question actually to ETSC, and you are many here that could share this, because we have heard quite a lot about the synergy with traffic safety, speed, and other sustainability goals, environmental, livability, everything. Have you any plans to do some actions? I mean, as NGOs and so on, with other NGOs, holding hands when it comes to have a more livable speed in our cities and livable view on our transport, stating that fastest is not the best. Do you understand my question? I mean, do you have any connection to these? Because we have talked ever so much, there is so much synergy. Do we work in line with that?
We do, certainly from an ETSC point of view. We work very closely with other NGOs here in Brussels, co-signing papers and position papers. We've done that in the past, and we continue to do that. And we found, on the whole, they're very supportive of calls to reduce speed. Particularly, I suppose, in the context of the urban areas and the 30 kilometers, livable cities, clean cities, or the Clean Cities campaign also has sort of streets for kids, so it's interested in reducing speed in that context. So our experience has been certainly very positive, and the two really are going, I would say, hand in hand. The 30-kilometer and the other sort of sustainable climate goals, and we're working very well and very closely with our NGO colleagues here in Brussels.
So I think that was a good ending for the discussion. In a positive way, we have a bright future in. We have lots of tools. We have friends in the other sustainability areas, and we have good tools for measuring and so on. So it's actually rather possible that the long-lived problem and issue with speed will be, or we could see a very nice and safe development. So by that, I want to thank all of you presenters and providing with the questions that I've got on the phone and everything. So thanks ever so much. I don't know if someone else wants to say something in the end.
Well, what I like to say, if I may, is we've got some tools. We don't have all the tools that we might want, but still it's an issue with culture. And we've got the culture of doing things very quickly and as many things as possible. And this is a positive value. And here with road safety, the positive value must be the slow attitude, and it's beyond the tools. It's to change the culture and then to have the political will. So if we don't change the culture, people will have the wrong reaction to they will feel what is safe is not what we know is safe, and this is how we struggle with communication and political will.
So then I will end with a commercial break. It's actually my pleasure to say that the next PIN conference, or the PIN conference, will actually be a physical one in Brussels on June the 20th. And all the information you will find on the ETSC homepage. And let's see you there, and we could have a chat in the corridors as well afterwards. So June the 20th, PIN conference in Brussels. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.